About a week ago, we did a video where I covered a topic about intentionality with your rifle builds. And in this video, I talked about 4 rifles that I thought every American should consider owning. And these rifles were built with intentionality. They had a purpose behind each build. And I took you guys along the journey as to why I built each one the way that I did. But the key takeaway that I wanted you to walk away with from that video was that we need to be intentional with what we do. And I know some people just like to collect guns, some people build guns for a hobby, and all of that stuff is fine. But I think if we're going to exercise our human rights to own firearms, to be able to fight tyrants, to be able to defend our lives, there's some intentionality that has to come into play with our different builds that we are trying to execute. We want to make sure we don't have the 16th Palmetto State Armory rifle with the same red dot, the same light. And by all means, if that's you and you like doing that, that's fine. But what I'm trying to do is wake people up to the idea, a new idea of intentionality behind the weapons that we own. And one of the trends that I saw in that video that constantly came up was the question, well, what about sidearms? And I only talked about my sidearm for about 10 seconds when I was talking about my micro carbine. I pulled it out and showed you guys, hey, I do have a sidearm that I carry when I'm carrying a bag gun as well. But I didn't give much coverage to handguns. And the thing is, I think handguns fall into the same trap as rifles. I think people tend to say, oh, I'm just gonna buy a handgun for this or a handgun for that, or maybe they'll have a Springfield, they'll have a Glock, a SIG, they'll have 5 different brands of handguns with different lights and different optics and different holsters and all of this other stuff. And it gets complicated, and you start to realize that, hey, maybe you're just collecting guns. And again, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's what drives you. This is a free country. We can do what we want. And around our rights, there's no limitation on your right saying, hey, you can't collect guns if you want. But the problem comes into play when people say, oh, I want to be a defender of liberty. I want to be a defender of life. I want to stand up in the face of opposition when it comes to my rights. But we don't have any sort of consistency with the weapons that we're using. And the problem comes in when I see people that their training levels don't match the amount of firearms that they own. And so there's a mental concept here that I'm trying to get across to you guys. It's a mindset thing where we want to be intentional with the weapons that we build, and then we want our skills to match those different applications and those different weapon systems so that we actually could be effective at defending ourselves, at defending others, at defending liberty. And our handguns are no exception to that rule. Now, the one thing that I'll say is with handguns, there's typically far less modifications that happen to a handgun versus a rifle. It's very easy to get down the rabbit hole of rifles and having gobs of different accessories that are totally different from one build to another. But you can also do the same kind of thing with pistols. And one of the traps that I see people falling into a lot is very different holsters for each pistol. So right away, all of the guns that I personally carry with, I have pretty much an identical holster for each of them. And the reason for that is I want to have consistency of placement, consistency of feel, and typically I want to know that what I'm reaching for is the same every single time. So I do have a couple different pistols on this barrel, and I'll just show you guys what they are real quick. These are the only pistols that I own. I know I don't have a massive collection. Some people might think, oh man, this dude's probably got 50 pistols, but the reality is, if I'm being honest with you guys, this is my everyday carry every single day of the year. Doesn't matter what month, doesn't matter the weather, doesn't matter my clothing. This Glock 19 is the pistol that I carry with me everywhere I go. And ultimately, I think that we should all consider sort of this mindset versus saying, oh, I need a pistol for every single occasion. Now, am I bashing people that say want a smaller pistol like this 365 right here because this is small and sort of easy to conceal? No, I'm not necessarily saying that. But what I am saying is we should be intentional about that sidearm because this is our go-to weapon. This pistol that I have on me is the most likely tool that I will use if I'm out and about and I'm ever confronted with danger. But do you see the problem here? If this is my go-to and then I randomly sprinkle in this 365 on my waistband, and a lot of people do this. I know a ton of people that based on the day, they're just gonna wake up and whatever they feel like, they'll stand at their dresser or whatever and debate with themselves for 15 minutes to decide which pistol are they going to carry. And I think that there's a danger in that. Now, I'm not going to be like a boomer and say, oh, you couldn't perform well with this 365 if you wore it. The reality is shooting a pistol is shooting a pistol. Drawing a pistol is drawing a pistol, and all the fundamentals carry over. But if you have a vastly different firearm and one that you are not trained well with, or you don't shoot well, it is somewhat dangerous to move away from something that you can consistently perform with at a moment's notice and then jump into a tiny little micro pistol because of comfort. And for me, I take the comfort and I kind of just throw that out the window. I say, what is the most effective gun for me to carry? And in all situations, almost all the time, it comes back to my Glock 19. So when we're talking about pistols and setups, that's the first thing I wanted to get out of the way, is just be intentional about the pistols that you're buying. I don't mind if people want to go out and buy a ton of pistols, because again, that's your right. It's your human right to own these firearms. And if you want to do that, I would just encourage you, you have to spend time with each pistol. And maybe it might make sense to you if you're saying, hey, I like a Glock 19 size, but maybe you like SIG and their grip angle or whatever it might be. You might get a 320 and a 365 because they're very similar. They feel very similar. How they shoot feels very similar. How this 320 and my Glock 19 shoot are very different. They are very different firearms. And when I pull the Glock out of my holster versus the 320, they immediately feel different. Can I perform with both? Yes. And I have the same red dot on both. I have the same weapon light on both. And that's another thing we're going to talk about real quick, is how you set up your pistol matters. So if you're going to have two different types of pistols, maybe you can be consistent with that weapon light. I have the TLR 7A on my Glock. I have the TLR 7A on my SIG 320. Typically on my Masada, I have a TLR 7A, and I try to keep the red dots consistent on carry guns, because what I want is when I present the gun, it to be consistent across the different pistols that I'm carrying. And I know a lot of people are going to fight me on that and say, well, you should be able to shoot iron sights like you have on the 365. I can, because I train with this pistol. I can shoot this just fine, but I have to be intentional about it. It's the same thing when we're talking about setting up your pistol. If you decide you want to keep iron sights, I would say be consistent with those iron sights. And the only caveat to that is if you're trying to achieve something different. So for example, you might have a threaded barrel on one of your pistols that you almost always shoot suppressed. Maybe you have suppressor height sights on that particular pistol and you don't on, say, another carry pistol that you use. And that's fine, but maybe you should make sure that the fiber optic on the front sight or lack thereof is the same between both guns, and the rear sight is the same on both guns, so that as you are shooting, you have somewhat of a consistent experience with those guns. Look, we're trying to set ourselves up for success, and this is just my mindset. Maybe you disagree, that's totally fine. You can fight me down in the comments if you hate what I'm saying. But I want things to be simple. I want them to be consistent. And like I said, that's why I carry this Glock 19. Now, the last trap that I wanted to talk about that people fall into when they're talking pistols and when we're looking at what pistol should everybody own is way too many modifications to the pistol. And guys, people with pistols tend to be very prone to overcomplicating the setup of the pistol. You'll see a ton of stippling, you'll see a trigger job, you see tons of undercuts, you'll see lots of Cerakote and serrations and all kinds of stuff, ported barrels and compensators, and I love those things. I think the guns look awesome. I think it's cool to have a gun like that. But at the end of the day, there isn't a single thing that I just listed off that was necessary to shoot a pistol well. So the pistol that you should get, the kind of pistol you should consider buying, is focusing in on the one pistol that you shoot really well, and then focusing in on your skill set before you just go decking it out with stippling, going into the trigger, going into all the other modifications. Because just like rifles, people can find themselves getting themselves trapped in the concept of just creating beauty queens, stuff that's fun to photograph, but ultimately their skill level doesn't match the performance capability of the firearm. And I just want to encourage you guys, as you are getting into pistols, to be intentional with them, just like we are with our rifles, because this is one of the most important tools that I carry with me every single day. This is on my body all the time, every single day. So I should have some intentionality behind what I'm building. So to answer the question, to close out this video, what pistol should you buy? What one pistol should you have? I can't answer that for you guys. It would be foolish of me to say, go buy a SIG, go buy a Glock, go buy an M&P. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to make sure that you are intentional about how you build your pistol, that you have a plan behind what you do, that all of the components on your pistol serve a purpose that is realistic, and then it's one that you are training with so that you can become the better protector, the better asset that you claim you want to be. And if you want to collect firearms, I would say first, let's get this skill set down. Let's get our skills with our firearms down. Let's become well-rounded as citizens in all aspects of our lives. And then after that happens, go collect those guns. The most important thing you can do is take the firearm that you carry every single day and get out, get trained.